And you are good to go. Take it away, Ken.
All right, good. Thanks very much, Brian. And welcome, everyone, to the War Industry Resistors Network webinar. This is our 46th webinar, believe it or not. We've done this for almost 4 years now on a monthly basis. So if you want to see any of our previous recorded webinars, they're on our website, and I'll post our link to our website here in a second in the chat. So this evening, I'm going to introduce and welcome 4 people, activists in Louisville, Kentucky, and just mention how proud I am of my hometown. I lived in Louisville for 23 years, don't anymore, but I still consider it my hometown. I have relatives and friends, dear friends there. So way to go, Louisville. Who we have tonight as presenters, there's 4 of them. There's Scott Motola, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, is a writer, organizer, service industry worker. They are an original founding board member of Locals for Liberation and currently live in Louisville. Sonia Wildevries, hope I got that right, is a lifelong queer anti-racist and social justice organizer. They is a daughter of Holocaust survivors. Wildevries is also a documentary filmmaker, Made Out, the Making of a Revolutionary, Gay Cuba. Has published several books of poetry, including Planting a Garden in Baghdad, and co-founded Queers for Cuba. Wildevries considers Palestine to be the epicenter of liberation for all, and in her free time communes with trees and wild critters, and including a raccoon, she told me, she just saw this evening. Wildevries has been to occupy Palestine several times. Ash Eisenmenger is an artist who's been involved in the movement for collective liberation in various capacities since awakening to systemic oppression through an aorta cooperative workshop in 2014. She dreams of living to see a world in which we're all free. Yeah, like that, Ash. And Greg Titchener is a social and racial justice advocate and activist. He's a public school teacher of 18 years in Louisville, Kentucky. And so was I, Greg. So welcome you all. I understand that Ash is going to be our first presenter, and Ash, it's over to you. Take it away.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, hello. As I always say, bear with me. Public speaking, I get anxious and usually emotional. So I remember the first time someone mentioned war profiteering in my presence, and I was baffled. It was beyond my comprehension, and that was only within the last couple of years, honestly. So for anyone else who might be fairly new to this understanding of the world we live in, I want to start by sharing a little bit of the mechanics of the modern weapons industry or military-industrial complex and how we got to this point. And for transparency, most of this info is pulled from a couple of very informative videos from Al Jazeera English and AJ Plus. So shout out to them and their amazing work. So in the 90s, as the Cold War was ending, the US government expected its defense budget to shrink and encouraged the 51 then existing weapons contractors to merge, signaling that only a handful of firms would survive the coming era. This resulted in a wave of mergers that gave rise to what's known as today's Big Five, or just 5 companies that now dominate the entire global defense industry: Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics. These 5 companies take home over half of the US Department of Defense budget every year and supply more than 40% of all weapons sold worldwide. They have an incredible amount of power and influence on US legislators through campaign donations and lobbying, with roughly 2 lobbyists for every elected official. This is an industry in which active duty military often in turn is lobbyists, and retired military officials often go on to serve on the boards of the Big Five. So it's a pipeline from the military to the military industrial complex. These companies rely on Congress to maintain wartime levels of military spending at all times. In the last election cycle, more than 98% of US lawmakers received campaign donations from the arms industry. And when these bought out elected officials vote should send military aid abroad, most of that money is required to go to American arms makers. Aid to Israel, for example, lost my spot, is primarily through grants that must be spent on US weapons. So that military aid essentially serves as a form of corporate welfare for defense contractors. In 2023 alone, US defense companies made almost $1 trillion in sales. In the year following Russia's initial invasion of Ukraine, the stock price for General Dynamics rose nearly 34%. And 1 year after October 7, 2023, Lockheed Martin saw an increase of over 54% in stock price. The rise of the Big Five has resulted in an incredibly powerful weapons industry, which profits from fueling endless conflict and invasion, and which controls and distorts the narrative of global politics, a narrative in which there must always be an impending threat in order to justify these mass expenditures. In the words of investigative journalist Abby Miller, war profiteers always win, regardless of the outcome. So I believe that when we use the term war, what we're often referring to is, in fact, invasion, imperialism, genocide. And I've come to believe that all of us alive today are here as a product of resistance. I believe we all have ancestors somewhere in our history, even if way back, who have resisted these oppressive structures. I believe we all carry a history of resistance in our bodies, in our very cells. And this belief is something that gives me strength. I believe that resistance is not only our right and our collective responsibility, but an innate part of our humanity. I believe that when we're able to be deeply connected to that humanity, beyond our conditioning, within these oppressive systems and structures, and the constraints of capitalism, that resistance is as natural as existing, as breathing. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's so cool that we're all here together, deeply aligned with our humanity. And I believe that resisting the weapons industry is also a moral obligation. For the sake of all life on Earth, as we know this industry to be one of the most environmentally destructive forces on the planet. I believe that all forms of resistance are deeply valuable and necessary, and I believe they all must exist in tandem with disruption of the flow of capital, as that is the only language that the ruling class responds to. Striking, boycotting, blockading. In the words of Colette Walsh, our tactics must directly confront and materially impede imperialism, as Palestinian resistance has called us to do. I also want to share a quote from Raytheon woman. The most urgent gap in our movement is the refusal to mobilize en masse to disrupt the supply chains, the factories, the ports, the warehouses, the trucks. We need to shift. We need to escalate. We need mass mobilizations to physically block the manufacturing and movement of weapons. And while we put our bodies in the way of the war machine, we must also pressure institutions to pull their investments from these same arms manufacturers. One without the other is not enough. Disrupt production, cut the funding. The responsibility to act is ours. Brave hearts to the front. And I'll finish with a few words from my statement just before our trial. That I know that this is an increasingly frightening time to resist the imperial war machine. I know it can be easy to feel swallowed whole by grief and hopelessness. Do not lose heart. Remember that every empire is destined to crumble, and a better world can be built in their wake. Remember that hope is a discipline, and courage is an exercise. Remember that together we are immensely powerful. Keep going until liberation. Thank you so much. That's all I have to say.
You rock, Ash.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you so much for the reminder that we carry resistance in ourselves, no matter how powerless we might feel at times. Thank you for that. And thank you, Ken, for getting us together here to talk with all of you. My name's Sonia Wild DeFries. I go by she, they. And I want to do a land acknowledgement, but I want to talk about that. Right now, we are on stolen land, unless you are an Indigenous person. This area that we're on is Chickasaw, Cherokee, Shawnee, and Osage. And it's not enough to say that. You know, the last time I heard that, I pictured years from now an Israeli sitting there going, this was Palestinian land. If we say that, we need to integrate those struggles into everything we do. We need to recognize that they are struggles that are alive today for water, land, resources. And that's really important. And depending on where you are, please, we must include that. You know, Indigenous people actually proportionally have the highest rates of police abuse and murder. And it's not an issue of the past. And the other reason that I wanted to bring that up is because looking at Israel is looking in a mirror. We are just an older settler colonial state, white settler colonial state. We can never forget the beginnings of this country, which were genocide and enslavement. And it's very crucial for us to understand the nature of this system so that we can truly change things, to know that it was in part our Jim Crow laws that inspired the way both South Africa and Israel organized their societies, organized their form of apartheid, and that they learned from the US, you know. And I've heard a lot of people, mostly white people in these days, say, this is not us. This is not America. Well, yes, it is. And until we face that, we can't change it. I've been thinking a lot about James Baldwin, amazing Black writer, brilliant thinker. And he talked about innocence in a way that really challenged me. He talked about the innocence of white people, and I want to read a quote from him. People who shut their eyes to reality invite their own destruction, and anyone who insists on remaining in a state of innocence, so that's ignorance, long after that innocence is dead, turns himself into a monster. And, you know, I thought about this when seeing what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, seeing the soldiers celebrate, seeing the CEOs of Raytheon celebrate that last year was one of their best years, and this is an even better year in terms of profit. They have turned themselves into monsters. And the violence that we're seeing here, the violence against our immigrant brothers and sisters, our siblings, against our trans siblings, against Black and Brown and Indigenous people, the statement made by our, what are they calling it, Department of War, Hexus. I don't remember their names. I think it's because I don't want to acknowledge their existence. But he made a special comment about how the Wounded Knee Massacre, the people who participated in that would continue to be honored. He didn't call it a massacre, of course. We know it was a massacre. But it's not an accident. It is, the good news is it's the empire dying. The good news is that we can learn about resistance from all of the people who have been fighting oppression for so long, who it's not new to, who it is what's going on in this country. It's more of an expanded, extreme version, but it's not something, for instance, Black and Brown and Indigenous people have never experienced in this country. So I wanted to start there. I wanted to say that, on a personal level, I do come from Holocaust survivors and people who were deeply involved in the resistance against the Nazis. And that gives me a lot of strength. So much of what we're seeing, there's parallels. There's always parallels in these kind of systems. also just want to say, want to honor my mother, who was a lifelong supporter of Palestine. And she was one of the many people in Holland who, after the war, thought, oh my God, we must go to Israel, the kibbutz, it's this socialist experience. And then other lefties came back and said, oh no, they're taking the land from the people who have lived there for thousands of years. So, you know, and also just really thinking about the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that have been killed, because we know it's not 65,000. And, you know, kind of went off script. I have a bunch of notes about Raytheon. But what has struck me so much about Raytheon is the perfect way that it fits into this, as our beautiful Kentucky writer Bell Hooks said, our imperialist white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Because Raytheon not only supplies weapons for genocide, they also supply surveillance equipment for Homeland Security and ICE. And to top it off, they supply weapons of punishment for prisons that are described as searing through someone's skin like being branded with a hot iron. So they have it all covered, right? They're protecting imperialist interests abroad, or helping protect, and, you know, supporting repression here at home. And it just, when I was researching them, actually after our action, it was just kind of mind-blowing to see how brilliantly they're part of everything. So they're making so much money, but they are also keeping the control. They're keeping the control both at home and abroad. And those are the two functions, right? It's to keep the markets internationally open for US imperialist need of resources, and to keep exploiting people here as well, and to keep people controlled. So I do want to get to talking about our action, but I want to say a little bit more about this also. You know, when we look, of course, Palestine is the first live streamed genocide I think that the world has seen. We didn't see when the Belgians killed 10 million people in the Congo, or any of the other many genocides, mostly carried out by Western colonialists or imperialists. And, you know, whenever you look, for instance, at what a country has, Gaza has the natural gas, Sudan has gold, Congo has cobalt, Afghanistan has copper, then it helps you understand the Western Europe and US interests are always about extraction, always about control and taking. And that is how this country is the richest country in the world. You know, and racial capitalism is at the center of this. The oppression of people of color internationally and in this country has always been a factor. And as white activists, it is so important for us to have that perspective, to center the struggle against white supremacy and racism, because that is the moving force also of fascism in this country. And if we don't center that, we're going to make the same mistakes people have made in the past, besides it being morally a corrupt thing to not center it. I have to take a breath here. Oh, and I forgot to set my timer, so I don't know if I've gone over time. But yeah, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about the action, actually. I think I've said enough about imperialism and the whole purpose of Raytheon. But the interesting thing is, a lot of us didn't know Raytheon was right there in the south end of Louisville. I didn't know it until just 2 or 3 years ago. And most of the people I talked to, both in the action and just around Louisville, didn't know it. And so one of the things that we succeeded in doing, the 15 of us who were arrested on February 2nd, 2024, and the many, many people who supported that action, because in any action like that, you have to have a tremendous amount of support, community support, and we did. We had people on communications, we had people on food, we had people on, we had lawyers who just, I don't know where they even came from. They were all there, right? And it was beautiful in that way. An action is never just the people who get arrested, and it's never just the arrest. What was very powerful about our action and actions like this is that we were really able to build after the arrest. Build in our individual communities, build collectively. I don't know if Scott's going to tell the story about their family, but that was a powerful one. You know, because when you take actions like that, you can reach people in a different way. I don't know what it is about that, but people pay attention in a different way. And you know, not everybody can do it. You know, obviously, if you're white, if you're cis, if you're a man, it's going to be easier, a white man, to be arrested. But each person has to determine what they can do in terms of those kind of actions. And there's so many other ways that we can resist. There are so many ways that we can resist. One of the most beautiful things that happened was the art that was created for the action and that showed up every time we had a press conference or an event or anything like that. The day of our trial, the day our trial started, the community came out big time. People came out and sang us into the courtroom. The whole square where we had fought the struggle for Breonna Taylor was filled with art. After we went into court, because they weren't, you know, during jury selection, they didn't let community members in. People stayed out there and gave testimony and read poetry. So it impacted our community in big ways, and I hope other people will talk about that too. And I want to read a poem later, but I want to read a quote that I think of a lot because, you know, as Ash was talking about resistance, we can, I think, get a lot of our hope from struggles around the world. I look at, you know, what's going on in North Africa, the Middle East, you know, Italy, Spain, these massive protests, Portland, you know, Chicago, where people are standing in harm's way to block ICE. These are the things that keep me going and inspire me. And so I'm going to read this quote by Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is rationally based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. So I'll leave you all with that for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm looking to mute myself.
Thank you, Sonia and Ash. We've had many Raytheon 5 events throughout the year, and I always feel so privileged listening to the others speak. And I learn so much. I wanted to first contextualize us being the Raytheon 5. Sonia talked a little bit about the action, but what we did was shut down Raytheon for most of the day, if not the whole day. And to do this, we had to get there at about 5:30 in the morning. So it's February 2nd, and it was really cold. It was dark. I don't know, Brian, if you want to maybe use half the screen for some slides or the whole screen.
Absolutely. I'll throw it up right now for you.
Okay. These are some photos from the action. I just want to shout out Gary Inman for taking these and sharing these. Okay, yeah, you could just cool. It's nothing crazy, it's just some slides. It was a peaceful action. We were arrested while some were arrested while singing. There was 15 of us that were arrested, and we're the Raytheon 5 because we decided to take it to trial. And that was a really important decision for me because I remember I talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer said, you know, this not taking this deal is the best you're going to get. It's the best you're going to get. So why wouldn't you take the deal? And I just, I decided to continue to trial. And I'm so glad that I did, because what people had been trying to tell me about take automatically foreclose things that we didn't know may or may not happen. Sonia was saying this a little bit. So because we took it to trial, things opened up. My family came to go to this trial, and my parents are Trump supporters. We ended up realizing and seeing on video that we were factually innocent. We were charged with criminal trespassing on key infrastructure assets. By taking it to trial, our lawyers discovered all of these documents that showed that what the line of Raytheon was and where we were all standing. And we were factually innocent. And this was presented at trial. Trial felt like Law and Order. I mean, at one point there was like a legal student intern, third year, who, you know, one of our lawyers turned around and said, whispered, go get this, you know, and he blows out the door and he comes back in with this file. And throughout the trial, we got the property manager to admit that we were not standing on Raytheon property. I believe that the prosecution was deeply embarrassed, and that the city and the county would not allow our case to be dismissed without us getting some kind of punishment. So what happened, and it's not our fault, it's not the property manager's fault, that the cops decided to charge us with trespassing on key infrastructure, criminal trespassing. That's not our fault that we were charged with that when we were blocking entrances. So regardless of all of the evidence that was presented at trial, I mean, it was really mind-blowing. We were found guilty. And none of that would have come out if we didn't go to trial. Because we went to trial, we had several press conferences. We've reached so many different people. And I think that's really important to bring up. I just wanted to say a couple other things. When I was thinking about what to say here, three main things like kept coming to my mind. The first is engagement in the movement. I am engaged in this movement because all oppression is inherently connected. And so I have been the subject of oppression in my life, but Palestine shows the common struggle with queer people, with trans people. And that was my entry point. The second thing I wanted to talk about, and they go together, is proximity. What is your proximity to the oppression that is happening? Are you part of it? Are you watching it? How far away are you from it? And who gets to be in proximity to safety and who doesn't? And I think all of these things affect one's engagement in a solidarity movement, in a liberation movement. And I wanted to put out there questions when we're done, because I rack my brain with this every day, is what are specific things that bring people to the movement, that bring white people to the movement, that bring people to the movement who are in proximity to safety? What doesn't bring them in, us in? What barriers are we trying to get over? And how can we overcome those barriers? I wanted to read something that I read at Nakba Day for the Louisville Students Justice in Palestine. And it's just a 5-point list. Because as Sonia was saying, standing up to white supremacy, even realizing that you're in it, because it's like the air, is our responsibility. And I wrote up 5 points on how not to show up if you're white, and especially if you're financially privileged. The first one is, don't tell Palestinians or other people of the global majority that we are powerless. I have heard this so many times, and it enrages me, because nothing could be further from the truth. And as Sonia was saying, find your way in. Not everyone has to be boots on the ground. I happen to be the one that likes to stand in front of vehicles. And that's some of my contribution, but that doesn't have to be everybody. The second is, do not dwell in a state of hopelessness, and absolutely do not burden Palestinians with our own moral crises. The amount of people, white people, who have told me that they are not only powerless, but they are hopeless, is many. The third point is, do not seek praise every time we act in solidarity. I find myself often wanting to blast on social media protests, which not only is unsafe, but it is not a good look. The fourth point is, do not believe that it will ever be easy or it will ever be glamorous. Truth telling is incredibly scary, and we have to do it anyway. The fifth is, do not be closed off to change and to adaptation. Some of us are going to lose our jobs. Some of us have already lost our jobs, our friends, family members. We have to show up and participate anyway, because as Sonia was talking about, mutual aid is not just the 15 of us that were arrested or the 5 of us that went to trial. I have never felt so supported by my community and the people who believe in liberation than going through this process, because it is exactly the things that so much of mutual aid takes place out of sight. Meals, jail support. So those are some of the things that I like to keep in mind. The way that I started in terms of proximity and in terms of how to engage people in the movement, just to go over, Palestine is involved in every movement of oppression. It has environmental concerns. It has educational concerns. It has homeless concerns. And it is about settler colonialism. So trying to show people that all oppression is linked is one of the ways that I am trying to get people to act. And another way is by constantly bringing up the people who have come before us to be able to let us go to jail for half a day and not for half of a month or half of a year. And they tend, for those people, for me, are Black, lesbian, and trans feminists throughout history. And it's a good place to start to learn more about movements for liberation. I too have a poem, but I'm going to hold off and let Greg take it from here.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, this action came on the heels of, for me, and I think everybody involved on this Zoom call was involved with the Breonna Taylor protests, and I was shocked during the Breonna Taylor protests, the level of police violence that occurred, and we saw tear gas, and I don't know. Well, I guess I was shocked because it was my first time seeing it firsthand as a white person. You kind of grow up. My code, and I grew up middle class, white in a mostly white neighborhood. We didn't mess with the cops, and they didn't mess with us, and that certainly was not the code. During the Breonna Taylor protests, we saw tear gas being used on children, peaceful protesters getting peppered with rubber bullets for filming the police as they were doing, as they were trying to take control of the narrative and the scene on multiple occasions. The city or the LMPD or local police department settled multiple lawsuits, and we're still in a battle 5 years later to decide. I mean, we've been fighting tooth and nail just to get them to take on a consent decree. It's not finalized. There's who's going to oversee. There's some things in the air yet, and we have to continue to push for that. But that's one of the things that led me to take this action. And I just wanted to start out. I think it's important. Sonia, well, everybody's kind of touched on it to this point, but I just Googled characteristics of fascism and found this list put together by researcher and political scientist Lawrence Britt in 2023, and it was a little chilling for me. Powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for the recognition of human rights, identification of enemies or scapegoats as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government are intertwined, corporate power is protected, labor power is suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, fraudulent elections, and rampant cronyism and corruption. If you go down the list of what we've got today, you can just check box after box of how we're fascism is alive and well. I'd add one thing too to Britt's list, which is shock and awe. This is it's an idea that intersects with several of his categories, but I feel it's especially important to name it specifically. As I sit here, just racing around silly with as much going on in my world as I can, as I would never wish on too many other people. It's a military strategy employed by World War II Nazi Germany, better known as the Blitzkrieg, but it's been around a long time before World War II, and I think it's a way to keep people from recognizing that we are in a fascist state and that are an authoritarian state or heading toward an authoritarian state. Keep everybody so busy in different directions that it's hard for them to truly understand what's going on in the world today. And we've got, I think, one of the major intentions of this action, the Raytheon 5 action, was to put a blip on the media. And I appreciate you hosting this and putting this out on the internet. We see control of mass media really affecting so much decision making. It's hard to know what's truly going on in the world. I just put together, I don't know, some stream of conscious poetry, and I'll leave it there. What is truly going on in the world today is that the United States is using militarized weaponry to silence voices calling for human and civil rights. What is truly going on in the world today is that police violence, and I'm defining that as unreasonable use of force, is a daily occurrence. And this police violence impacts the poorest communities the hardest. And when we say poor communities, this disproportionately includes members of the BIPOC community here in the United States. And this happens worldwide as well. What is truly going on is that the history is being hidden. What is truly going on in the world is that gun violence has recently become the number one cause of death for our teenagers, surpassing suicide. Gun violence is a public health crisis that it will take all of us to fix. Imprisonment and mass incarceration are not fixing our societal ills. Lack of affordable housing is not fixing our societal ills. Underfunded public schools and underpaid education professionals are not fixing our societal ills. What is truly going on in the world is that our local and national tax dollars are being used to fund genocide in Gaza. A call for a ceasefire is not anti-Semitism. Criticism of the state of Israel and the Netanyahu military regime is not anti-Semitism. And I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Greg.
Well, thank you all. That was amazing and powerful, all four of you. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Sonia, Scott, Greg. You connected a lot of dots. You didn't just talk about an action against a defense contractor. You helped everyone see how it's all connected, and that was really great, great, great. We're going to go to...
Sorry. I just wanted to add a point that I see so often. I see signs that say, "Don't blame me, I voted for Kamala." And it's really interesting because those signs and the ones that say, or like, you know, have a picture of Trump and say, no, nope. I see a lot of people sort of doing this when they say, well, I voted blue. And a lot of what I try to do is, and we try to do, is sort of open people's eyes to it's so much more than Republicans or Democrats. And I can't expect everyone to, you know, jump into the disillusionment that we perhaps all feel and have gone through. I say this like little story that happened that morning at Raytheon when I was standing in front of the entrance. A car came and I stood in front of it. And the driver, who was an employee, he was trying to get to his job. He got out and he was pissed. And he said, he just threw his hands up. He said, you know, look, I have to feed my kids too. That's what he said. And I paused because with this action, like, we're not trying to inconvenience people. That wasn't our goal. And I went to say, hey, it's not personal. Stop myself because it's deeply personal. And I said, I was like, if your kids were getting decapitated, being targeted, I hope to God that someone on the other side of the world would be standing in front of a weapons factory that was making those bombs. I mean, and he just sort of, you know, got mad and drove away. But I think what gets lost in actions and protests is that they cause somewhat simple and benign inconveniences. And then that inconvenience, whether it's causing traffic or blocking traffic, those become the headline of the story. And then that becomes why people don't want to support protests. Sorry, please go on now.
That's great. No, that's great, Scott. Right on. What we're going to do, as we always do, is do a Q&A session. And 8:51, we usually think we're going to go for an hour and almost always go over the hour. So that's fine. If you four presenters are happy to keep on going, we'll go for a little bit more. See if we can go for some Q&A, some back and forth for, let's just say 20 minutes or so, and see how it works. And the way we do this is in your reaction button on your browser where you're looking at Zoom, there's a hand raising function, you know, electronically, digitally raise your hand. And what that'll do is cue us, it'll line you up and it'll cue us the fact that you want to speak. And I'll call on people one at a time. You'll get to say what you'd like to say. Hopefully it's brief and it's got a question attached to it so our presenters can respond. So if you have a question, let's do that, or a brief comment, and you can raise your hand. And, you know, while I don't see any just yet. So while we're waiting, I have one. And it is that I believe that you all are going to appeal the guilty verdict. And I know, or I suspect, that it's true that you're going to try to see if you can make a necessity defense, if it'll be able to be heard in the court. Not everyone may know what a necessity defense is, but I'm sure that you all do and have given it a lot of thought. So that's my question to you is, when you get another hearing, how are you going to put Raytheon on trial with this necessity defense? What is it going through your mind? You don't have to elaborate a lot. I don't want you to show all your cards, but in general, what are you thinking? How is it that you're going to say, look, we're not the illegal ones, they are? Any one of you.
That is, yeah, the appeal has already been filed, so we're just waiting to see what happens next. But all of us did make a commitment to go to trial again, and we're hoping for that outcome without the gag order this time. You know, I have the papers here right here that say that we are not allowed to have evidence or testimony regarding the basis or merits of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, as such evidence is irrelevant. And then they said the same thing about Raytheon's perceived role in that conflict, as such evidence is irrelevant. We think it's not irrelevant. And, you know, we would be using international law and the Leahy law. There's a lot of, and now that the international courts, you know, have made their decision and so many countries are speaking out about this being a genocide, we knew that. And it's always been ethnic cleansing. I mean, that's the thing. It's not really about Netanyahu. It's about the nature of the state of Israel, because it began just like the United States did with ethnic cleansing and genocide.
Ken, with the necessities defense, are you saying like better of two evils? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, what's known as the necessity defense is the idea, it's often made the metaphor that if there's a house burning down,
right,
people in it, you go and break in to save the people because,
right,
because you're breaking the law to break into the house, but you're saving lives.
Yeah.
So there's a necessity to break the law in order to save the lives. And that's why people make the case that they had to do what you're going to do because there's a genocide, and guess
Yeah.
who's perpetrating and making profits from it? It's Raytheon, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's what I mean.
That was the first argument our lawyers wrote and presented it. Like, this is before trial, and they said that that was when they started with the gag order of this is irrelevant. But basically we were all found guilty for breaking into a house to get people out of a fire, essentially. And I think, like Sonia makes a great point, is that one, we're hoping for a new trial, and if that happens, it will take time. And in the time just since our last trial, more international bodies have come out in support of Palestine for whatever reasons they have. And I wonder if that will change what we're allowed to do. We had a judge that was extremely ignorant about Palestine and about Israel and about anything that was going on. And I think that really scared her, what the topic was even about. And she really leaned into the prosecution, and anything that they said, you know, no, she would say no. But I hope that we can use that defense.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add something about our trial? Just because it's a reflection of the changing of public opinion. Several people were let go out of the jury because they said they agreed with us and they wouldn't be able to find us guilty. That was beautiful. People we didn't know.
Yeah. Okay, well, I hope you get to do it. It's very rare that a judge or a court allows a necessity defense. Every now and then you get a little bit, you get to squeak some of it in, and, you know, hopefully it gets into the public ear. But yeah, here's hoping that you get to do that. I see some questions in the chat. I'm going to try to scroll back and see if I can find them, but I do also see Brian's hand raised. So Brian, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, and Sonia just answered it a little bit with the potential jurors who spoke out, and that is a beautiful thing. Although I almost kind of wish they stayed quiet so they were part of the deliberations and could practice a little nullification as well. That was my first thought. But I was wondering what the reaction from your neighbors were. Just the people of Kentucky. Did many reach out in support? Or did some kind of come up to you quietly and say, I wish I could support you publicly, but I'm with you, but I'm afraid to speak out? I'm just wondering what kind of reaction you got from the people around you.
Anyone?
I think we had a beloved community that was pretty strong and solid. The Breonna Square, but for those not familiar with the Breonna Taylor protest, we occupied the the park across from the mayor's office, and the courthouse is right there as well for 500 and some odd days. We got to meet a lot of people that shared a common interest and build a community through that. And they were supportive. We didn't pull the whole crowd back together, but we're still in touch, and it's a step away. It feels like, and maybe an appeal, or we're just one event away from rebuilding that beloved community. I did something I wanted to mention too, that that I forgot to. If you don't mind my doubling back, this was an enhanced charge, and it is in response to the BLM protest nationally. So intentionally, it's a trespassing on key infrastructure, and it'll cost you now 90 days to speak out and take action for human and civil rights, and we saw this pop up in a number of states, and this was the first time that law was brought to trial. And I think some of what we saw was they weren't about to let us slide and not get a charge. I felt like yeah, I'll leave it there. Somebody put the comment, the judge sounds like a puppet, and I understand she may have been advisory to some of our state legislators in other areas. I don't know about this specific law, but yeah, she was under a lot of pressure from the people that put that law in place.
I wanted to say, because someone had asked earlier in the chat, we didn't address this. What happened? We were found guilty. We have a fine that we don't have to pay because we're on an appeal. And what I thought was interesting is that we didn't get shelf time. And shelf time basically means you have jail time hanging over your head, 30 to 90 days. And when we were found guilty, the jury gets to choose our punishment. So they chose a couple $100, like a lower fine, and no shelf time. So, which means we're somewhat freer to go to other actions and make the decision if we want to be arrested, or if that's a possibility, do we go to the action? And so that was really great coming out of trial, that we didn't have shelf time.
Yeah, that's great. Brian just wrote in the chat, oh, wow, that's a statement right there by the jury. Well said, Brian, thanks. So how about other questions or comments? I know, Greg, I appreciate you talking about the beloved community in Louisville, and I lived there in Louisville. It was my home for 23 years, and I love it still. And so many good, loving, caring, justice-minded people there. And I know you do have a wonderful community. And I went to one of the Breonna protests up on the square, so I have rubbed shoulders with some of the people you love and who love you, and I appreciate your community for sure. I see Maria with a hand raised. Go ahead, Maria.
Hey, y'all. Can you hear me okay?
We hear
Yeah.
you, Maria.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for all of your remarks and creating a virtual event that we could join. Something that's on my mind that came up through a couple different statements that folks made around what is important about this particular tactic, where are gaps in our movement around scaling, and the pressure that needs to be placed on the supply chain that comes out of, the quote unquote belly of the beast here, and how materially connected we are to the bombs that are, hopefully pausing right now, but you know. Um, and many of us, I think, here on Turtle Island, like looked with a lot of inspiration to the folks of Palestine Action in the UK that I think have sort of been raising the bar for our movement about what it looks like. And for those who are not familiar, I'll just do briefly to say Palestine Action is a UK based organization, fairly decentralized, that started in 2020, focused specifically on cutting the ties of Elbit Systems in the UK, which is Israel, quote unquote, Israel's largest weapons maker. So because their model was, looking at different actions of various risk levels, focusing on Elbit and then the ties to Elbit, including property damage, disruption, similar blockades to what you all did of blockading entrances to factories throughout the UK. One of the things that I noticed that seemed to be a key ingredient to their success, being able to cut some ties to Elbit, it was the consistency and the repetition. And it seemed like that helped to raise the cost so that because we know that these actions, like the one at RTX, they can't block the flow of weapons for very long, or they don't. You say we hope that blocked the weapons for a day, but we aren't able to. We're not stopping. I mean, I think like the Mask Off MERS campaign, trying to find these nodes of the supply chain that we can hit and create large impacts. I'm getting to a question, I promise. So sorry. One thing that I was thinking about is trying to understand the analysis from our conditions here in Kentucky and in the US broadly. And perhaps the key infrastructure asset laws are part of that, and the fact that we have different legal systems. What do you think are the best strategies for building the type of consistency that I believe Palestine Action has been able to do to their success? Or, and this is a different question, take whichever you might be interested in, what do you think is the most pressing to focus on right now to move toward addressing the gaps that Ash mentioned around the supply chain disruptions? Thank you so much.
Go ahead, anyone.
I love hearing Ash speak because she's so brilliant and I keep waiting. I do want to just say one thing. I have to go in a sec. I'm sorry, and I'm bummed I can't join the rest of the conversation. But those are questions. One of the things I was thinking about is just the amount of people that are open to doing frontline actions in Louisville. One, I think is not as big. And then two, to organize actions is really difficult. One thing I was thinking about is that, as far as I know, Kentucky is still getting a cop city. And a lot of the tactics used in Atlanta, I think, can be studied, and who knows? Because I think there are a lot of good tactics used there that are on a smaller scale than a mass shutdown of a company. So I think we have to think about what specifically Louisville has and what we have to work with to try to answer those questions too. But yes, I asked those same things.
Let me give you a follow-up that we did a webinar with two of the organizers in Top City in Atlanta. And for those of you who haven't seen it, you can go to our website. It's one of the recorded webinars there. And you're right, they are very much on it, very smart about what they did.
I just want to thank everyone. I'm really sorry I have to go back to work.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Ken.
Bye, Scott.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Can I say something about that question? It's interesting you bring it up about Palestine Action. I was so inspired by the film that was made about them. So inspired that I went to look for it last night. And of course, it is no longer available to us here in the US or in the UK. It's been taken off of all of the sites. You know, I think we have to be very careful where we do our organizing, how we talk about it nowadays, especially with the increased repression. But one aspect of being able to take riskier actions is really building community and mutual aid. Because unless people know that, one, their lawyer will be paid for, but also that their dogs and cats and kids and whatever else that they're risking will be cared for. So building community in this time is more crucial than ever. And that might seem, you know, I think it's not just for survival, but it's also for survival because a lot of people are barely surviving. But it is crucial to have that in place so that people do feel freer to be able to take more effective action.
Ash or Greg, that this might be a good place to make last comments before we call it a night.
Please go ahead, Ash.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say I struggle so much with words, with language. I love those questions, Maria. I really do, and I think about that all the time. And I think I would have to see your questions in writing and think about them for days to really be able to respond to them with any kind of coherence. Yeah. But I really appreciate and resonate with what Scott and Sonia have shared.
You know, I think it ties in. Not to, it's probably, I don't know if this answers your question or not, but this is where I'm kind of going with it. I think it's a demand problem. I think, you know, we've been sold this bill of goods that you got to have guns, 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 missiles, war, protection, protection, protection. And I think, you know, what part of what Black Lives Matter was trying to do with defund the police or abolish the police is trying to get people to recognize we wouldn't need this if we had a community that actually cared about one another. What if we did have a community that cared about one another enough to where we didn't have to have police? Yeah, that's a well, it's probably a twisted up answer or to what you were going for, Maria, but I haven't thought about the supply side all that much. Demilitarize. It's a trick.
Yeah.
And I just add one thing briefly.
Yes, please, Sonia.
I think it's such a big question and it has so many layers. You know, I think it's like kind of the question or one of the questions. You know, and one thing that immediately pops up for me is we can't get rid of this genocidal military industrial complex without getting rid of this system that needs it, that thrives off of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone over an hour, and that's good. Thank you all. I will give you one last chance. Any of the presenters, I know, Sonia, you asked me, you said one of your favorite questions was what gives you hope? But I actually think you all have answered that. Unless you want to say something more about it, I'll tell you what, you give me hope, not only because of what you're doing there, what you did do there, but also because of the way you think about it and the way you feel about it and the circle of people you have around you. It's yeah, a very hopeful thing going there. Any last thing for any of you?
I have a poem by Assata Shakur, who just passed last week. Do we have time to read that?
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's kind of the perfect poem for these times. And for people who don't know, Assata Shakur was a Black revolutionary who was framed and imprisoned and escaped and was able to live her life out in Cuba for decades. And she wrote this poem. She also gave birth in a prison in a 4-point restraint. So she knows what she's talking about. Affirmation. I believe in living. I believe in the spectrum of beta days and gamma people. I believe in sunshine, in windmills and waterfalls, tricycles and rocking chairs. I believe that seeds grow into sprouts and sprouts grow into trees. I believe in the magic of the hands and in the wisdom of the eyes. I believe in rain and tears and the blood of infinity. I believe in life. And I have seen the death parade march through the torso of the earth, sculpting mud bodies in its path. I have seen the destruction of daylight, seen bloodthirsty maggots prayed to and saluted. I have seen the kind become the blind and the blind become the bind in one easy lesson. I have walked on cut glass. I have eaten crow and blunder bread and breathed the stench of indifference. I have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy. And if I know anything at all, it's that a wall is just a wall and nothing more. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of love and the fire of truth. And I believe that a lost ship steered by tired, seasick sailors can still be guided home to port. That's for all.
Amen. Presente hasta Shakur. All right, all. We will do one in November, I hope. We'll have another webinar. I'm working on one. I don't have a presenter yet, but it's going to be about ICE and the National Guard going into our cities. So hopefully we have that for you coming up soon in November. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you to our wonderful presenters.
Thank you
And
so much.
have a good evening, everyone. All right. God bless you all.